The twin suns of Taralis colony burned brightly over the dusty trade square. It was always loud during market day, shouts of merchants, clattering carts, and the constant grinding noise of machines hauling minerals from the nearby mines. The idle colony was a place where thousands of beings, human and alien alike, came together for one purpose: survival through trade. In the middle of the market, a group of alien traders had gathered. They stood around a trembling figure, a young woman of their kind. She was covered in a thin cloth, her face streaked with dust, her hands rough with scars. Her eyes, once bright perhaps, now looked tired, frightened, and full of shame. The traders spoke loudly so everyone nearby could hear. "She is useless," one of them declared. "Too dirty to keep," another sneered. "No one wants a tunnel rat." The words cut into her like knives. She had been called names before, but never in front of so many. The crowd stared at her, some shaking their heads, others laughing softly as if her suffering was entertainment. She lowered her gaze to the ground. Every part of her body wanted to disappear into the dirt, to become invisible. She had lived her entire life in the tunnels beneath her people's city, where the poor dug for scraps of metal and crystal left behind by miners. There, dirt was her constant companion. No matter how much she washed, it clung to her skin, as if the world itself wanted her to stay unclean. Now being dragged into the bright light of the colony square, she felt naked, not in body, but in dignity. She was being shown as something unworthy of keeping, as though she were less than a tool. The traders laughed again, pulling her forward. "See? Not even worth a crumb of bread. She is weak, dirty, and unwanted." The crowd slowly lost interest. Most people turned away, searching for something more profitable or entertaining to spend their time on. Some shook their heads, muttering that it was shameful to even bring such a worthless girl here. Within moments, she was left standing alone in the dust, trembling as the traders walked off to find other business. Her knees nearly gave out. She sat down on the ground, curling her arms around herself. For the first time, she thought maybe the traders were right. Maybe she really was too dirty to keep. But one person hadn't looked away. Across the market, a human named Marcus leaned against a metal cart full of machine parts. He had been sent to the colony as an engineer, tasked with repairing broken diggers, pumps, and power systems. His days were long and tiring, filled with oil, sweat, and the sound of hammers. But he was used to hardship. Humans always were. Marcus had seen many things on Taralis: fights between traders, machines breaking down, even the occasional riot over food. But he had never seen something quite like this. A young woman humiliated in front of everyone, while the rest simply ignored her. He frowned. His people had a saying back on Earth: a person's worth isn't in how clean they look, but in the fire inside them. And when Marcus saw the girl's eyes, even though they were filled with fear, he also saw a spark, a small flame of someone who had survived when no one expected her to. He couldn't ignore it. Marcus stepped forward, his heavy boots crunching against the dust. The girl lifted her head slightly, startled. She wasn't used to anyone approaching her, especially not a human. His figure was tall, strong from years of hard work, and his face carried the calm determination of someone who never turned away from a problem. He crouched down so he wasn't towering over her. "You look like you could use some water," Marcus said softly. His voice was calm, without judgment. The girl blinked, confused. No one had spoken to her kindly in a very long time. She hesitated, unsure if this was a trick, but when Marcus pulled a small flask from his belt and held it out, her thirst was stronger than her doubt. She reached out with trembling hands, half expecting him to pull it away and laugh. But he didn't. He let her take it. She drank carefully, each sip easing the dryness in her throat. When she finished, she looked at him with wide, uncertain eyes. "Why?" she whispered. Her voice was quiet, hoarse from disuse. Marcus tilted his head. "Why what?" "Why give to me?" she asked. "I am dirty." He shook his head. "You're alive, that's what matters. Dirt washes off, but people don't just throw away people. The words stunned her. No one had ever spoken of her like that. To her people, she was just a burden, a stain that couldn't be erased. But this human, someone she didn't even know, saw her differently. By now, a few nearby traders had noticed Marcus speaking to the outcast girl. They laughed and shouted, "Look at the human. He wants the tunnel rat." Desperate, isn't he? Only a fool would talk to her. Marcus didn't even glance at them. He ignored their voices as if they didn't exist. Instead, he looked back at the girl. "What's your name?" he asked. She hesitated, then lowered her head again. "They don't call me by name." Marcus frowned. "Then I'll call you by one, until you tell me yours." The girl stared at him, her mind racing. She couldn't remember the last time someone wanted to know her name. It felt strange, almost frightening, that he was treating her as someone important enough to be named. For a long moment's silence hung between them. The crowd around them moved on, the shouts of the marketplace filling the air once more. Yet in that small circle of dust, it felt like the world had paused. Marcus finally stood, offering his hand. "Come on, you don't have to sit here while..." They laugh. "Walk with me." Her eyes widened. "With you?" "Yes," he said simply. Her heart pounded in her chest. She was afraid of more mocking, afraid of betrayal, afraid that this was all a cruel joke. But when she looked into Marcus's steady eyes, she didn't see mockery. She saw patience. She saw a promise that he wasn't going to treat her like the others did. Slowly, almost painfully, she reached out and placed her scarred hand in his. His grip was firm but gentle, pulling her up from the dust. For the first time, she wasn't kneeling on the ground waiting for insults. She was standing, holding the hand of someone who didn't turn away. As they walked together through the market, the mocking voices rose again. "Look at them. The human takes trash for a pet. Too dirty to keep, but good enough for a fool." Marcus didn't stop. He didn't look back. And after a while, the girl realized something incredible. When she walked beside him, the insults didn't hurt as much. She still heard them, but they no longer buried her. Because someone had chosen to see her differently. Someone had chosen to see her as a person. And though she didn't yet understand why, a small spark of warmth began to grow inside her heart. The walk through the market felt longer than any journey the alien girl had taken in her life. Every step at Marcus's side made her nervous. She could still hear whispers and laughter following them, though softer now. Some aliens stopped what they were doing to stare. Some humans looked too, their expressions mixed, some curious, some disapproving. But Marcus walked calmly, his grip steady on her hand. He didn't rush. He didn't flinch when voices mocked. To him, it was as if the rest of the colony didn't matter. The girl kept her head lowered. The ground was safer than faces. If she looked up, she feared she might see pity, or worse, disgust in the eyes around her. She had lived too long in shadows to believe kindness could last. Yet, when she dared a glance at Marcus, he wasn't laughing. He wasn't even frowning. His face was calm, focused, as though he had simply decided this girl would walk beside him and no one's opinion could change that. Finally, they left the loudest part of the market behind. The sounds of shouting merchants faded into the distance. They entered a quieter street lined with workshops and storage sheds. The smell of oil and heated metal drifted through the air. Marcus led her toward a wide building with heavy doors, made of steel. He released her hand only to push the doors open. Inside, the air was cooler. Rows of machines, some whole, some broken, stood along the walls. Tools hung from racks. The place was filled with the sound of ticking gears and the faint hum of a generator in the corner. "This is my workshop," Marcus said, stepping inside, "where I spend most of my time." The girl hovered near the door, uncertain. The space was clean in its own way. Not spotless, but organized, with every tool in place. It felt different, not like the tunnels, where everything was chaos and dirt. Not like the market, where laughter had sharp edges. Here there was order. Here things seemed to have purpose. Marcus noticed her hesitation. He pointed to a chair near his workbench. "Sit if you like. You're safe here." She moved slowly, as if each step might trigger anger. When she finally sat, her hands folded tightly in her lap, she watched Marcus closely. He walked to a shelf, pulled out a small box and opened it. Inside were packets of dried food. He placed one in front of her. "Eat," he said. Her eyes widened. "For me?" "Yes," Marcus replied simply. "For you." Her hands trembled as she picked it up. She waited, half expecting him to snatch it back at the last moment like others sometimes did to mock her. But he didn't. When she slowly opened the packet and tasted the food, she almost gasped. It was plain, but to her it felt like a feast. Marcus leaned against the workbench, arms folded. He watched quietly, not rushing her. He knew hunger when he saw it. Back on Earth, his childhood had been poor. He remembered days when his family had to share one small meal between many. Perhaps that was why he couldn't walk away when he saw her abandoned in the dust. After a while, she lowered, the empty packet looking guilty. "I should give something back," she whispered. Marcus shook his head. "You don't owe me." "But why?" she asked again. Her voice was stronger now, but her eyes still showed confusion. "No one helps me." "Then it's about time someone did," Marcus said. He took a seat on the other side of the table so she wouldn't feel cornered. "I don't know your story. I don't know why your own people treat you that way, but I know this. No one deserves to be left alone in the dirt." She stared at him, silent. His words felt unreal, like a dream. She almost wanted to cover her ears, afraid that if she believed him, the kindness would vanish and she would be left broken again. Marcus didn't press her. Instead, he picked up a small device from the table, an engine coil that needed repair. He began working on it with a wrench, letting the quiet stretch between them. The girl finally asked, "Why do you fix machines?" Marcus smiled faintly. "Because if I don't, the colony falls apart. These diggers and pumps, they keep people alive. Someone has to take care of them, that's my job." She tilted her head. "You keep them alive." "In a way," he said. He glanced at her. "Machines aren't so different from people. If you ignore them, they break. If you take care of them, they can do amazing things." His words lingered in her mind. If you ignore them, they break. She wondered if he was really talking about machines, or about her. For the first time in many years, she spoke her name softly. "I am called Saren." Marcus set down the wrench and looked at her with respect. "Saren," he repeated, as though the name itself mattered. "That's a good name." Her chest tightened. To hear her name spoken without mockery, without anger, it felt like being seen for the first time. Later that evening, Marcus stepped outside to check the power lines behind the workshop. Saren followed quietly. The sky above Teralis was painted in shades of orange and purple as the suns dipped lower. Wind carried dust across the colony streets, glowing in the light. A group of traders passed by, noticing Saren at Marcus's side. "There she is again," one laughed. "The human keeps her like a pet," another sneered. "Too dirty to keep, but the fool holds her hand." Marcus turned his head, meeting their eyes. His gaze was steady, calm, but it carried steel. "She has a name," he said, firmly. "It's Saren. Remember it." The traders blinked, surprised at his tone. Most humans kept quiet when mocked by aliens, but Marcus spoke with such certainty that they muttered under their breath and moved on. Saren stood frozen, heart pounding. No one had ever defended her before. She whispered, "You spoke for me." Marcus looked at her. "Because you matter. Don't forget that." Her throat tightened and she looked away quickly, afraid he would see the tears forming in her eyes. Days passed. Saren stayed close to the workshop, at first too shy to move without Marcus's guidance. But slowly, she began helping. She swept the floor, organized tools, and even handed him parts while he repaired machines. One afternoon, while Marcus struggled with a broken mining drill, Saren studied the blueprints pinned to the wall. She pointed with hesitation. This part here. In the tunnels, we used stones to block similar cracks. Maybe it can stop the leak. Marcus raised his eyebrows. You've seen this kind of problem before? She nodded, shy but firm. The tunnels. Always breaking. We learn to fix, or we die. Marcus tested her idea. To his surprise, it worked. The leak stopped, and the drill hummed back to life. He gave her a smile. Good thinking, Saren. You just saved me hours of work. Saren blinked, stunned. Someone had praised her, genuinely praised her, for her knowledge. A warmth spread through her chest. For the first time, she felt like she had done something that mattered, but not everyone accepted this new bond. Rumors spread through the colony. Some said Marcus was desperate. Others warned that taking in an outcast would bring shame. A few even whispered that humans should not mix with alien strays. One evening, a fellow human worker visited Marcus's workshop. His name was Hale, broad-shouldered and practical. You're making a mistake, Hale said bluntly, eyeing Saren as she stood quietly in the corner. The aliens laugh at you. They'll never respect you if you keep her around. Marcus wiped grease from his hands. Respect doesn't mean much if you throw away what's right. Hale frowned. She's nothing, Marcus. A burden. Why risk your place here for her? Marcus's voice was calm, but his words were sharp. Because she's not nothing, she's someone. And I won't stand by while everyone pretends she isn't. Hale shook his head, muttering about wasted effort, and left. Saren had heard every word. She looked at Marcus with wide eyes, her voice trembling. You defend me. Again and again. Why? Marcus paused, meeting her gaze. Because sometimes all it takes is one person to say, you matter, and I choose to be that person. Her heart ached. No one had ever chosen her before. She whispered softly, as if afraid of breaking the moment. Then, I choose to stay. Marcus nodded. Then we'll face whatever comes, together. And with those simple words, a fragile bond of trust became something stronger, something unshakable. The days on Taralis colony passed with slow rhythm. The sunrises came with red dust filling the air, and the sunsets always painted the sky with deep violet. For Marcus, the days used to be the same. Machines breaking, machines fixed, and then quiet nights spent alone in his workshop. But now things had changed. Saren was there. At first, she kept close to the corner of the workshop, silent, almost invisible. But as the days turned into weeks, she began moving with more confidence. She learned where Marcus kept his tools, how he organized spare parts, and how the machines worked. Sometimes she asked questions in her quiet voice, and sometimes she gave small suggestions. Marcus welcomed it all. He never pushed her, but he noticed how her eyes lit up when she realized he valued her words. One morning, Marcus was repairing a large water pump that had broken in the mines. Without the pump, entire sections of the colony would dry out. He was on his knees struggling with a heavy valve when Saren walked closer. You're forcing it, she said softly. Marcus paused. He glanced at her. You think so? She nodded. In the tunnels, when pipes broke, we used smaller turns. Let the pressure move, not fight it. Marcus tried her idea. With a careful twist, the valve slid into place smoothly. He looked up at her, impressed. You've done this before. Her shoulders lifted slightly, almost a shrug. In the tunnels, we all had to learn. If we didn't, we died. There was no pride in her tone, only fact. Marcus felt a heavy weight in his chest. This girl, mocked as too dirty to keep, had survived through skills most ignored. He smiled. Well, looks like I need your help more than I thought. For the first time, Saren gave a small, shy smile. It was quick, gone almost as soon as it appeared, but Marcus saw it. It was the first crack in the wall she had built around her heart. As the weeks passed, the two began working side by side. Marcus repaired the machines, and Saren used her knowledge of tunnels and minerals to guide him. She taught him which crystals carried energy best and which rocks weakened under pressure. Together they made the machines stronger than before. Word began to spread in whispers. Some aliens muttered that the dirty girl was being used by a human. Others said Marcus had gone mad, trusting an outcast. But there were also quiet voices. Miners who noticed their machines lasting longer. Workers who saw water flowing better. Who began to wonder if maybe the girl wasn't so useless. After all, Saren still heard the insults when she went outside, but now she didn't face them alone. Marcus was always beside her, calm and steady. When traitors sneered, he ignored them. When someone mocked, he spoke her name firmly, reminding them she was not a shadow but a person. Each time, Saren felt her chest grow warmer. She had never known what it meant to be defended. One night as they worked late, Marcus looked up from the workbench. Saren sat across from him, sorting wires. "You know," Marcus said, "I've been thinking. Machines. They're like people in a way. When you care for them, they give more back. When you neglect them, they break down." Saren tilted her head, curious. "You think I am like a machine?" Marcus chuckled softly. "Not exactly. But I think people are the same. You were neglected, Saren, left to break. But you're not broken. You're stronger than they realize." Her hands froze on the wires. His words sank deep, shaking something inside her. "Stronger?" she whispered. "Yes," Marcus said firmly. "You survived what others couldn't. That's strength." Her eyes filled with quiet tears. She looked down quickly, afraid to let him see. But inside her chest, something new grew, a belief she had never dared to hold before. Maybe she wasn't worthless. Maybe she wasn't too dirty to keep. The bond between them deepened with each passing day. It wasn't sudden, like fire. It was steady, like water carving a stone. Saren began to laugh softly when Marcus made dry jokes. Marcus began to notice how her hands no longer trembled when she worked. But their growing trust was tested sooner than either expected. One morning, alarms rang through the colony. The deep sound echoed across the streets, making people rush from homes and workshops. Marcus stepped outside with Saren close behind. "What is it?" she asked, her voice tense. "Mine collapse," Marcus muttered, reading the flashing lights on the tower, one of the main tunnels. Crowds gathered, worried voices filling the air. Colony leaders shouted orders. Workers ran with tools and equipment. Marcus listened as officials discussed the situation. The main support beam cracked. One alien overseer said, "If it spreads, the tunnel will collapse." Another waved dismissively. "Seal it off. The workers inside can dig their own way out. Not worth risking more lives." Saren's eyes widened. "No!" she cried, stepping forward. "If you seal it, the air will run out. They'll die." The overseers turned to her, sneering. "Be quiet, tunnel rat. No one asked you." Marcus clenched his fists. "Listen to her," he said firmly. "She knows tunnels better than any of us." The overseers laughed. "You trust her? She's nothing but dirt. You shame yourself, human." Saren's face burned with shame, but she stood her ground. She pointed toward the mines. "The rock. There, it's weak. If you block it, the pressure will collapse faster. But there's a vent path. If you clear it, the air will flow. The workers can survive." Marcus saw the fire in her eyes. This wasn't guesswork. This was knowledge. Knowledge born of survival. He made his decision. "Come on," he said, grabbing tools. "We're going down there." Inside the tunnels, the air was heavy with dust. The ground shook under their feet as distant cracks echoed. Miners coughed, panicked, trying to dig their way out. Marcus led Saren deeper, trusting her guidance. "Here," Saren said, pressing her hand to the rock wall. "The fault line runs this way. We must move fast." Together, they worked. Marcus used his strength to shift heavy rocks. Saren guided him to the weak points, showing him where to push and where to stop. The air grew hotter, thinner, but they pressed on. Finally, Saren found the vent tunnel. Here, if we clear this, air will flow. Marcus swung his pick with all his strength. Rocks tumbled aside and a rush of cool air filled the tunnel. The miners gasped in relief. Cheers erupted. They were alive. When they emerged back into the colony covered in dust, the overseers stood waiting. You disobeyed orders, one hissed at Marcus. Marcus met his gaze without fear, and saved lives. Because Saren was right. The miners, behind them nodded, voices rising. She saved us. She knew the tunnels. Not dirty, brave. The overseers fell silent, their arrogance shaken. For the first time, the colony saw Saren not as an outcast, but as someone who had saved lives. Saren stood in shock. She had never heard her name spoken with respect. The warmth in her chest grew until it felt like sunlight. She turned to Marcus. He smiled at her, his eyes proud. You did it, Saren, he said quietly. And in that moment she realized their bond was no longer fragile. It was strong, forged not only in kindness, but in struggle. She was not alone. The colony was never truly quiet after the mine collapse. The miners who had been saved whispered Saren's name with respect. They told others how the outcast girl had guided Marcus through the tunnels and kept them alive. For the first time in her life, Saren heard her name spoken not as an insult but as something valuable. Yet not everyone was happy. The overseers, alien leaders who ruled the colony's work, were angry. They had been embarrassed in front of everyone, shown wrong by a girl they had mocked for years. To them, Marcus had defied authority, and Saren had humiliated them. So behind closed doors, they whispered. They planned. They decided that if another disaster came, Saren's voice would not be allowed to matter. But fate didn't wait long. It happened 2 weeks later. Marcus was working late in his workshop, fixing a broken generator. Saren was beside him, sorting through wires. She enjoyed the work now, her hands steady, her eyes focused. She no longer looked like a shadow hiding in corners. She looked like someone alive, someone needed. Suddenly, the colony alarm rang again. Marcus dropped his tools, his face tense. Another emergency. Saren stood quickly. Her heart raced. The memory of the mine collapse was still fresh. She prayed it wasn't worse this time. They rushed outside. The streets were already filled with people. Overseers shouted orders, their voices sharp with fear. A miner pushed through the crowd, his face pale. The lower tunnels are cracking. If the supports fail, the energy chamber will collapse. The whole colony could lose power. Panic rippled through the crowd. Without the energy chamber, Teralis would fall into darkness. Machines would stop. Water would dry. The colony would not survive long. Saren's eyes widened. She knew those tunnels. She had grown up near them. The pressure vents are unstable, she whispered. If one breaks, the chamber will explode. She stepped forward, raising her voice. I know a way. There's a side path. If we release the crystal locks, the pressure will flow out safely. The overseers spun toward her, their eyes cold. Silence, one barked. You are not trusted. She saved lives before, a miner shouted, but the overseers ignored him. Her words mean nothing. We decide what must be done. Saren's chest tightened. She looked at Marcus, panic in her eyes. They won't listen, but I know the chamber will collapse if they block it. Marcus looked at the overseers, then at the frightened crowd. He had a choice. He could stay silent and follow orders, or he could risk everything and stand by Saren again. He didn't hesitate. I believe her, Marcus said loudly, his voice carrying across the crowd. Saren saved lives before. She knows the tunnels better than any of us. If she says there's danger, I'll follow her. The overseers sneered. You are a fool, human. If you go down there, you die with her. Marcus's eyes were steady. Better to die doing what's right than live watching others be buried. Gasps filled the crowd. Many had never heard a human speak with such fire. Saren's heart pounded. Marcus wasn't just defending her, he was choosing her, above authority. Above his own safety. The overseers waved him off. Go then. Waste your life. Marcus grabbed his tools, then looked at Saren. Lead the way. Her breath shook. You trust me? With my life, Marcus said simply. And with those words, they ran into the tunnels. The lower tunnels were worse than before. Cracks spread across the walls. The sound of grinding stone echoed like thunder. The air burned hot, filled with dust. Saren led the way, her hands brushing the walls, feeling the vibrations. She moved like she had in her childhood, eyes sharp, senses awake. She knew the rock's language. Marcus followed close, carrying heavy equipment. His body ached, but he didn't complain. He trusted her steps completely. Finally, they reached the chamber. The sight made Marcus's breath catch. A massive crystal core glowed at the center, pulsing with unstable energy. Sparks of light shot through the cracks around it. If it burst, the explosion would destroy half the colony. Saren pressed her ear to the wall. The side vents are sealed. The pressure has nowhere to go. Marcus wiped sweat from his brow. How do we open them? She pointed to 3 crystal locks embedded in the rock. They must be released together. If not, the energy will shatter the chamber. Marcus studied the locks. Each one was far apart, buried in stone. We'll need more people. Saren shook her head. No time. The cracks are spreading. We must do it. Just us. Marcus nodded without hesitation. Tell me what to do. The work was brutal. Marcus slammed his pick against the rock, his muscles straining. Saren worked with bare hands, pulling shards free. The chamber rumbled, glowing brighter as energy built. Faster! Saren cried, her voice breaking with urgency. Marcus's arms screamed in pain, but he pushed harder. Sweat poured down his face. Finally, the first lock cracked free. 1! He shouted. Saren yanked at the second lock, her fingers bleeding, but she refused to stop. With a final pull, it came loose. 2! The ground shook violently. The last lock glowed brighter, resisting. Saren stumbled, falling against the wall. Marcus rushed to her side. Go, she gasped. You must release it. Marcus looked at the lock, then at her. He shook his head. We do this together. He grabbed the crystal with her, their hands side by side. With all their strength, they pulled. The lock tore free. A roar of energy surged through the chamber. The vents burst open, streams of light shooting into the tunnels. For a moment, Marcus thought they would be consumed. But then the pressure balanced. The glow softened. The ground grew still. The chamber was safe. When they stumbled back into the colony, covered in dust and blood, the crowd gasped. They're alive. They saved the chamber. They stopped the collapse. The overseers tried to speak, but the miners shouted louder. Saren saved us again. She knew the way. She is not dirt. She is our protector. The overseers, faces burned with shame, for the second time their orders had been wrong, and Saren had been right. Saren stood frozen as the voices rose around her. Respect, praise, words she had never imagined. She turned to Marcus, her eyes shining with tears. They see me. Marcus smiled, exhaustion in his face but pride in his eyes. They finally see what I saw all along. Her heart swelled. In that moment, she understood something deeper. It wasn't just that Marcus trusted her. It was that he had given her the strength to trust herself. And no matter what came next, she knew she was no longer too dirty to keep. She was Saren. She was alive, and she was not alone. The days after the energy chamber disaster changed everything. For the first time since she could remember, Saren walked through the colony streets without people laughing at her. She no longer heard the whispers of dirty or useless. Instead, she heard miners nod and say, "That's the girl who saved us." Traders stepped aside instead of pushing her. Even children pointed with wide eyes, whispering her name with awe. Saren had spent her whole life being invisible or insulted. Now she was seen. It felt strange, almost frightening, but also warm. Like stepping into sunlight after years underground. And Through it all, Marcus was beside her. He never claimed credit for saving the chamber. Whenever someone tried to thank him, he always said the same thing. Saren led the way. His voice was steady, leaving no doubt. He didn't just stand beside her. He made sure everyone else stood beside her too. But not all hearts changed. The overseers watched with cold eyes as Saren's name spread through the colony. They had mocked her for years, and now the same people, who once laughed with them, no longer did. Their power, their pride was shaken. And in their bitterness they began to whisper of ways to push Saren down again. Marcus noticed. He saw the glares, the muttering, but he also saw Saren growing stronger. She was no longer the trembling girl he had first met in the dust. She was standing tall now, her chin lifted, her voice clearer. Still, he worried. And he promised himself one thing: no matter what came, he would never let anyone drag her back into the shadows. One evening, Marcus and Saren sat outside the workshop, watching the sun sink behind the mountains. The sky glowed orange and purple. The air was cooler, carrying the smell of metal and dust. Saren hugged her knees, her eyes far away. "I don't understand," she whispered. Marcus turned to her. "Understand what?" She glanced at him. "Why you helped me from the beginning. Everyone said I was worthless, too dirty to keep. But you," her voice broke softly, "you looked at me like I was more." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Because you are more. From the first moment I saw fire in you. You were on the ground, but you weren't broken. You were still alive, still fighting." Her eyes widened, shining with unshed tears. "But I was nothing." "You survived," Marcus said firmly. "That's not nothing. That's everything." Silence stretched between them, filled with the hum of the colony machines. Finally, Saren whispered, "And now, what am I?" Marcus looked at her, his expression steady, his voice low but strong. "You are my partner, my equal, my mate." The word hung in the air. Saren froze, her heart pounding. She had dreamed in her darkest hours of being wanted, but never had she imagined someone saying it aloud. Not just anyone, a human who could have walked past her, who could have ignored her, but instead chose her. Her lips trembled. "Mate? You would call me that?" Marcus nodded. "Yes, not because of what the colony thinks, not because of what you've done, because of who you are." Saren's chest tightened. For so long she had carried the weight of being unwanted. Now someone had lifted it away with a single word. She didn't answer at first. Her throat was too full of emotion. Instead, she reached out and gripped his hand. For the first time, she didn't feel small when someone touched her. She felt whole. But the test of their bond wasn't finished. That night, overseers called a meeting in the central hall. The whole colony gathered, voices buzzing with curiosity. Marcus and Saren sat together near the front. The overseers stood, on the platform, their eyes sharp. "This colony must remain strong," one announced. "But strength cannot grow from weakness. We cannot allow outsiders and outcasts to change our way." Murmurs spread. Everyone knew who they meant. Another overseer stepped forward. "This girl, Saren, yes, she helped twice, but twice does not erase a lifetime of filth. Twice does not mean she belongs." His voice rose. "Do not be fooled by one human's madness. She is still too dirty to keep." The hall erupted in gasps and whispers. Some nodded in anger, but many shook their heads. Miners shouted, "She saved us." Others argued back, voices clashing. Saren's hands trembled. The words "too dirty to keep" stabbed deep, even after all she had done. She lowered her head, the old shame rising like smoke. But Marcus stood. His voice thundered across the hall. "Enough." Silence fell. All eyes turned to the human. Marcus looked at the overseers, his jaw tight. "I saw her save your miners when you would have let them die. I saw her keep your chamber from exploding when you told her to stay. Silent. You call her dirty. but her hands are stained with the work of saving lives. You call her worthless, but without her this colony would already be ash. His voice grew louder, sharper. You mock her because she reminds you of your failure. She is stronger than you, braver than you, and more loyal than you will ever be. And if you still dare call her too dirty to keep, then remember this. He reached down and lifted Saren's hand in his own. His voice was steady, filled with fire. She is my mate. What you throw away, I choose. What you shame, I honor. She is not dirt, she is my equal, and no one, not you or anyone else, will take her from my side. The hall shook with noise. Miners cheered, shouting Saren's name. Traders clapped. Even children raised their voices. The overseers tried to speak, but their words were drowned by the crowd. Saren sat frozen, her heart hammering. Marcus had not only defended her, he had declared her, openly, in front of everyone. He had taken the words that once crushed her and turned them into nothing. Tears slipped down her cheeks. She gripped his hand tighter. The overseers, faces dark, with shame, could not stop what had begun. They left the hall in silence, their power broken. That night the colony felt different. Lights glowed brighter, laughter filled the streets. And Saren walked not as an outcast but as someone finally accepted. People nodded to her, some even thanking her directly. But none of it mattered as much as the hand holding hers. When they returned to the workshop, Saren sat quietly, her heart overflowing. She turned to Marcus. Do you mean it? Truly? That I am your mate? Marcus met her gaze. Yes, always. Her voice shook. Even if I am scarred? Even if I still carry dirt? He smiled softly. Scars mean you lived. Dirt washes away. What matters is you. Saren's tears fell freely. For so long she had begged for a place, for a single hand to reach for her. Now she had it. More than that, she had someone who would never let go. She leaned closer, pressing her forehead gently against his shoulder. For the first time in her life, she felt safe, truly safe. In the weeks that followed, Marcus and Saren worked as one. Machines grew stronger, tunnels safer. The colony began to change, little by little. People who once mocked Saren now sought her advice. Children followed her, asking about tunnels and crystals. She was no longer too dirty to keep. She was the girl who had faced the dark and lived. She was Marcus's partner, his equal, his mate. And together, human and alien, they proved something the overseers had forgotten. True strength was not in power or pride. It was in loyalty, in compassion, in the courage to see worth where others saw none. On one quiet evening, as the sun set again, Saren whispered, When they called me dirty, I believed them. But now? She looked at Marcus, her eyes bright. Now I believe you instead. Marcus squeezed her hand. Good. Because I'll never stop reminding you. And in that moment, Saren finally understood. She was not just saved. She was chosen. She was more than a survivor. She was more than an outcast. She was more than too dirty to keep.